Hello, and thanks for joining us. I'm Shannon Sand, an agricultural economist and extension educator with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Center for Ag Profitability and one of the hosts of Ag Smart Money Week. CAP hosts regular webinars most Thursdays at noon Central Time. You can find the schedule of upcoming webinars as well as the archive of every recording on our center's website, cap.unl.edu. Today, we will be discussing cost of production and financial analysis. To present, we are very excited to be joined by Glennis McClure. She's an associate extension educator in the area of farm and ranch management analysis. Glennis, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Shannon. I'm glad we could reschedule. I'm getting my voice back. So I've had something kind of nasty going on, so I know we had to reschedule this one. So I appreciate those that have come back on and joined us today. So, okay. I guess with that, I'll go ahead and get started then. All right, thanks, Shannon. So it's good to have Shannon and Ryan on in case, things go haywire. And I hope that you can hear me okay. Please let us know if you're having any issues with that. So, yes, I work with the crop and livestock budgets. And let me go ahead and switch my screen here. Definitely working with those things that I work with. Definitely budgeting, doing enterprise analysis. It's all money smart. So I had to throw that in there. So I'm very glad to be able to participate with this program that Shannon and others created for us this year. But anyway, so yes, I'm on campus in Lincoln and I'm a statewide educator, and I work in the areas of the crop budgets, the livestock budgets that we work on, and also the custom rates report. A lot of people use that report. It's one thing, it's a market rate study, and folks provide information on what they're charging. And that's a report or survey that we do every other year. So we're just gearing up to do that again. So if you know of people or you do custom work yourself, let us know and we'll put you on the list to receive that survey. The more people we have participate, the better the information is. But I also tell people that, I get calls, what should I charge? Well, it's one thing to look at the report and that survey information, but it's also very important to understand your costs. That relates back to budgeting, and in our ag budget calculator program, we can do some calculations on what is it costing you to do your field operations or do field operations for others. And so that all relates. And then also I do some work on farm stress. So I know we have, I think, a webinar coming up, maybe even next week, I think, on farm stress. So if any of that is of interest to you, stay in touch and follow us and follow our schedule for different programs that we're doing on that. So with this today, I'm just going to really talk a little bit and introduce you to cost of production and why. Why do we want to know cost of production? And what should go into those enterprise budgets, and a little bit about input cost changes. Why does that happen? We see that, we see them going up, we see them going down, and obviously that plays a part in our cost of production and our enterprise budgeting. And then I'm going to spend some time talking with you about our ag budget calculator, which is a really cool resource. It's an online resource, so you don't have to understand Excel, you don't have to understand spreadsheets. You can just go online and work with the ag budget calculator and create your own enterprise budget. So we'll spend some time in this session talking about that, and I'll show you some of our screenshots, and then I'll go live into the program by the end of our hour here today. All right, so knowing your cost of production, a lot of people, if you've seen me present, you've probably seen this slide before. It's just one of those I keep handy. But I think understanding cost of production, the first thing I think of often is that we used our cost of production in marketing and cost control. If we know what's all going into our budgets, what can we change to change those costs a little bit? But if I understand what my cost of production is, let's say I'm growing my corn for $4.50 a bushel. hopefully I can market it above that and have a profitable scenario, okay? Because that's really important. I think understanding where we are with those costs can help us make some decisions in our marketing. Obviously, too, understanding our overall profitability. If I have 1,000 acres, 500 in this crop, 500 in that crop, and I can kind of pull those numbers together and can project some profitability. And also, how am I doing, or how are my costs comparing, or how do I benchmark that information with other information that's out there? And then also, what changes can I make? What changes in my production practices? Can I do some soil testing? Can I do some reduction in fertilization costs? Still have good production? What can I do to vary some of those things and actually save some costs and increase my profitability? And how do my different enterprises compare? We can do that in our ag budget calculator. Once we have some budgets in, how do they compare with some other scenarios? And am I better off to plant more soybeans than I am corn or something else? That kind of thing. And I know Shannon and Ryan too, if there's questions, you just let me know. And we can stop and try to address those, or we can address those at the end, whatever your preference is. So what's the most important resource that we have when we're budgeting, when we're looking ahead for this next year? What would that be? Any thoughts on that? You can put your answers into the chat if you want to, but what's the most important resource we have? All right. Basically, it would be our records. So in most anything we do, as we're planning, as we're, again, that whole money smart thing, having good records, having good production information, having good, what were my inputs last year? What was my overhead last year? That's the kind of information that we can glean back from our records. We can make adjustments as we look forward, of course, but that's first and foremost one of the main things that we need. So I'm just kind of plugged in some different pieces of information here of items that will go into our budgeting. So having, of course, information on our cropping system when it comes to crops. So how many acres, what's our projected yield, what's our expected yield, how do we grow that crop? What is our processes? What is our operations? Of course, we got to put machinery costs in there. We've got to put our input cost and all those kinds of things in there. So field operations, including our machinery and implements, our material and inputs, our seed, our fertilizer. In the case of livestock, we of course want to know, what is that livestock? How many head? How long do we keep them? All of those kinds of things are pieces of information that go into the budgeting process. And then when it comes to crops, if we've got irrigation systems, what does that cost? What does it cost to run the irrigation system? What's the fuel, the energy? What's our repair costs going in for equipment and irrigation? What did the system cost us? What's that depreciation cost that we need to cover? Okay, so these are pieces of information that are very important when we're working on cost of production. So again, that's what we've got. And then let's see what we've got next. All right, then also, we're going to put in some annual rates in our budget year. What is our interest cost? What's our opportunity cost? And also our interest that we may be paying. And also prices having to do with fuel. So the way, again, our ag budget calculator set up is, you put in what you're projecting your diesel cost to be for the year, your gasoline cost, your energy cost, your electric, if let's say you have electric pivot, you're going to put those rates that you're expecting to pay for this next year. So those are key pieces of information. I've already mentioned a little bit about overhead. What is overhead? So it's things that we can't say are absolutely direct to a crop, But we still have our overhead and our utilities that we pay for the farm. We have insurance costs, like that overall insurance cost, not just crop insurance, but what is our property insurance cost? Our accounting fees, when we're paying our accountant to help us with taxes, those kinds of things are our overhead expenses. So those are like usually general expenses that should be allocated across our different enterprises. And then I've mentioned too that in our budgets, yield and revenue projections can be entered in. Now, in our old budgets, our old method using our spreadsheet, our Excel files, we did not do anything with yield and we did with yield, sorry, but not revenue. And so that's a new thing that we can do, and we can project what our net return is with our new budget calculator. Okay. So just to remind you, actually, we just published our crop budgets for 2024. Again, we've got 84 crop budgets, and that represents 15 different crops. Of course, most of the budgets are going to be corn. Corn is planted in almost all of our counties in Nebraska. We have soybeans, wheat, sugar beets, peas. Anyway, that's 15 different crops that we have in our crop budgets. And so there's 84 total. There's about 25, 26 corn budgets, about 10 soybean budgets, about same in wheat, but the rest then make up some of the other miscellaneous crops, alfalfa. We've even got a pasture budget, some cover crop budgets in there. But anyway, those can be found at our CAP website. And also CropWatch posts those as well. So if you're familiar with that, you can look at the CropWatch and look at our information on our crop budgets for 2024. And then all of those budgets now have been entered into our new ag budget calculator. We're still calling it new. We have probably, I don't know, 1,200 and some users. That's awesome. Of course, we know that there can be a lot more. It's in the cloud. Folks can use it and access it free of charge. We've had a lot of grants to help us pay for our ag budget calculator, especially our North Central Extension Risk Management Center. We had the Soybean Board, Nebraska Soybean Board, Nebraska Corn Board, have all generously donated so that we could create that program. And it's a work in progress. It works really, really, really well for crops. We're working on the livestock piece of it now. But that can be accessed here at the agbudget.unl.edu site. And so just as a reminder, again, our Center for Ag Profitability has a lot of our farm and ranch management information. And you could go over to the crops and you'll see a drop down. Whoops. And then our budgets now, you'll see those both in CropWatch and in CAP, where there's a PDF file of our budgets. And then there's an Excel file. So all of our budgets are still done in a spreadsheet format. And then we also then have all of the reports, everything's entered into the ag budget calculator. So all of those reports are available also in PDF form here too. So just a quick look at, we're working with the University of Missouri Rural and Farm Finance Policy Analysis Center. And again, we do these webinars generally weekly. And so several weeks ago, we had their director on, Scott Brown, provided a webinar, and it was very good. They look back at sort of in general, sort of what's happening with ag economics information. And I thought this was a good slide that I grabbed from there to sort of say, hey, one of the biggest things that go into our budgets, especially our crop budgets, is our inputs and fertilizer, phosphorus and potassium, and our fuel costs. So this was just kind of a look at, we had this run up in those costs in that coming off the pandemic, the 2022 timeframe, and we can see here how things have come back. And so, yes, we had higher production costs as we did our crop budgets during this period of time, and now we're seeing a softening of some of that. Now, we don't know, we can't always predict when we did I think it was our 21 budgets, we were back over in here, and then we just had this huge spike in costs. And so we had to do some, hey, you can plan, you can budget, but sometimes things change. So you got to keep that in mind. When we start researching what goes into those budgets for the new year, we're looking at this, that August, September timeframe. So somewhere in this ballpark. And then, have things changed? Have they gone back up? That's always something to keep in mind, how that we can do something one day and then we see some changes. But being able to be flexible in your budgets, going in, being able to make some changes is something kind of important to kind of keep in mind as well. I show this slide. This is an older soybean budget, so don't pay attention to the numbers so much, but I wanted to share with you that when we set up our new budget calculator, we kind of kept with a similar layout, in that we want to look at our field operation costs, including labor to run the equipment, fuel costs that go into those field operations, our repairs on our power equipment and our implements, as well as ownership costs of our power and our implements. Okay, so we have field operation costs. What does it cost per acre to plant, spray, run the pivot in this case, combine, truck, and so on? So we've got that figure. And then we have things broke out by material costs, what goes in with each of those operations. So like when we're planting the seed, we might have some herbicide, we might have some fertilizer in the case of corn. So we have those things built in. So we got field operation, materials and services, and then our interest costs and our overhead costs, as well as what is our land costing it? What is either our opportunity cost if we're an owner of that land, or what our rental costs would be. So if we're cash renting, what does that cost to us? And that gets figured into our cost of production. So again, just that layout is something that we've stuck with as we've switched and gone to a new resource. These are very, very important things, especially when we're talking about cost of production on crops. So with the ag budget calculator, now I'm going to kind of switch gears and talk a bit about that, as long as I can talk. Excuse me. Anyway, but the ag budget calculator, you go into this website, you can then just create from scratch a budget. You can start from scratch and just start entering in your equipment cost, your inputs, and so on. Or you can actually customize and pull down one of our university budgets and then go in and work with it. We're planning on doing very similar things with the livestock budgets too. You can just go in and start from scratch, or we'll have some budgets loaded in that you might be able to work with and then go from there. All right, so again, the program is web-based. It'll work on any computer or even your mobile device. We've made it so it's PC or Mac friendly, of course, anything from the web. So it's available. So really, in order to establish an account, all you need to do is add your email and create a user ID, or your email is your user ID, and then you create a password. So in order to access your account, you just go in, enter your email, and enter your password once you've got that established. And we do like to have your email because we have updates from time to time that we want to tell our users about. We don't bug our users very often. We don't send a lot of emails regarding that, but I do also like to have feedback. How is it working for you? We always want people to let us know, did you find a bug? Was there something that wasn't quite working for you? And maybe it's something very simple that we can address. But again, we want to stay in touch to some degree. So it's important to have the email. We don't know, everything that you enter is anonymous. We can't, use your information in any of the things that we do. Because again, we don't know if you've entered something just to play around with it, or whether it's something that, it's a budget that's very useful to you. We don't know. Okay. And that's not important to us. It's important to us for you to be able to budget and use the system wisely and correctly. Okay. Again, you can start from scratch, or you can copy one of our budgets, and I'll show you how that works. and you save those into your account. So as you go, you're saving. And so if you work on it for an hour or two and come back, that should all be there for you. So, and then from year to year, it's really nice. We've got duplication features built in. So let's say you have, one thing nice about this is, let's say you have like 10 fields of corn. You can do a budget, you can do like one foundational corn budget and then duplicate that. And you could have all of your budgets for corn. Like you might have some rented ground, you might have some owned ground. So those budgets can all be a little bit different, but you can duplicate and then just go in and make changes. And then even from year to year, once I've done my budgets, I can go in and make changes to those, into a new year. So it's just like everything, when we first start working with something, it's going to take some time. But once you've got things established in there, that really makes a difference. So I always tell people to sit down at your computer and spend some time with it. I've had people tell me that this program is very intuitive. It's pretty easy to work with. So, but again, we're here to help. That if you have questions, I do Q&A sessions. I do other training sessions on the program, so we could actually get into more detail. But I just need to know what people need from this and what they're having trouble with, and then we can go from there. So I have this screen in here just to kind of remind of some of the things I wanted to mention to you. We've already talked about that you can customize your budgets. We have our budget set up so you can look at your cash costs versus your economic costs. Economic costs, again, I ask people this a lot in the sessions. Economic costs are your total costs. So in the long run, we want to make sure that we're covering all costs, our economic costs, all right? From sometimes, and several years ago, all we could maybe do is cover our cash costs in the short run, from year to year, because our commodity prices weren't doing as well. So we run into those scenarios, but in the long run, we need to cover all costs. And you can look at your budget reports with cash and economic. And then again, as I mentioned, we do have a revenue section, so we can do some projections. We can say, well, what if we figured for $5 corn next year or $5.50? What does that look like? How am I covering all my costs, and what does my profitability projections look like if I put in revenue? And then the whole farm section is really very nice in that if I've got several crops entered, several enterprises, and we'll have it so that when we have our livestock budgets in, that you can pull all those together and look at a total projected profitability. And then also it gives us a way to take a look at our overhead and then allocate those over all of our different enterprises. We can reconcile expenses. So we do have some features in here where the computer with the program is actually calculating depreciation, it's calculating repair costs, calculating fuel. And you might say, well, this looks pretty darn close to what I'm expecting to spend this next year. Or you could say, oh, we might be a little off. I'm going to adjust those figures and I can reconcile those expenses in the whole farm section and reconcile those over the different enterprises that I have. And so we've got the whole farm reports where we bring things together. We've got some analysis features built in where we've got break even. We have a risk module. Right now it works for corn and soybeans and the crop insurance scenario. So if I pick 70% coverage of crop insurance and I end up with some kind of loss, what does that look like? How am I covered? We've got that module in there now for that. And as I mentioned, comparing enterprises, there's a feature in there for that. We've added a cash flow. So I know our bankers are going to like that feature, or at least you would like that feature to be able to do a report to take to your banker. But what you're planning, you're doing all this work and saying, okay, well, I've got so much seed costs, I got so much fuel costs, I got so much of this and that. And the program will say, well, yeah, you're probably planting, or you'll say, I'm planting in April, I'm planting in May. So it's going to show up on the cash flow during those months. And that's all well and good, but you might have paid for it a few months ahead of time, or you might pay for it later. You can actually move those costs or those expenses as to when you actually pay for them. So we've got that feature built into the cash flow. All right. I do want to mention, and Ryan, and I'm going to look here at the chat. Okay, good. Ryan, I see you put the link into the chat for the crop budgets. Would you also, Ryan, be able to put the link in for the CAP article I did that does some summary on some of the crop budgets as well? So there is a CAP article, and I do summarize what some of those cost of production figures are looking like for 2024. All right. So I'm just going to kind of run through some screenshots, if you will, and just talk briefly about those. Then I'll flip over and we'll try to get into the ag budget calculator, and we'll look at that a little bit more closely. But anyway, this is just a picture of the managed enterprise area, and we have action items on the right side of the screen. But the managed enterprise area is a very key area, because this is where if I click on the managed enterprise, then I get my list of enterprises, and this happens to be like a 22-year, some budgets that I did. And you can name those enterprises however you want. So in this case, I put all of my dryland soybeans in one enterprise, okay? I might have several fields. I can do it that way, or I could put them all together. I can do it field by field, however I want there, okay? I've also got, oops, see if I can get back. Oh, I don't know. Now it's skipping ahead on me. See if I can get back here. Sorry. All right, back to this. I'll be careful with my mouse so it doesn't do that. Anyway, so you can see though, like I have different corn budgets in here. I've got irrigated. Of course, that cost is going to be different than my dry land. And I could name those however I want. You can see the one says my corn, but it says number 31. That actually, in that case, I saved a budget number 31 from the university budgets, and then went in and made changes. So I could have changed that name. I could have customized it however, but you can see I've got my list here. And then the pencil is where I could go in and make edit changes to that basic information. The field operations is a very key area, of course, and we'll take a look at that. The clipboard is where I can look at reports. And then if I decide I really just don't want that budget at all anymore in my files, I could just delete it. Okay, now, so here's that edit enterprise screen where I can name my enterprise. I can decide which budget year, because that's kind of important. I've got particular information in for a budget year, like what my fuel costs are, what my interest rates are, so that kind of information. So I want to be sure that I'm picking the right budget year, setting up the right budget year. And then I'm going to describe that it's a corn crop. So all my corn enterprises, I could pull that all together so I could see overall, even though I've got irrigated and dry land, what's my overall cost production on corn? So when it comes to marketing, I market it as such, how many acres in this particular field, what my yield is, and I mark whether it's irrigated or non-irrigated. And then just moving on still as a part of that screen, I'll mark also here whether the land that I'm using for this particular crop is owned, cash leased, or share leased. And so if I own this, in this case, I enter in a cash rent equivalent, because if I wasn't farming it, what could I receive for that? What is my opportunity cost, in other words, of farming that ground? And then what's the real estate taxes that I would pay, as an owner there? And then field operations, as I mentioned, this is that little tractor icon, but here's a list of, I entered all this information. I do a burn down, I plant, and so on. I put in the months of when I'm doing it, kind of helps keep things chronological. And it does say here that everything is okay. So there are details that I've got to enter. And this is pretty important to have everything, have the green okay come up. Because if I didn't have everything correct, we'd have a red add. And that would mean I'm missing something. I didn't remember to put in something. And so in order to kind of keep us on track, we've got these little signals. Also, as I'm here, I want to mention, you'll see throughout the program, there's question marks like this, and that's just a help message. What are we asking for here? So that's kind of a key thing there too. And then we get into those details, what's behind the scenes there. Again, I name my operation. I say when it happens. In this case, I'm planting 100% of the field, 100% of the acres. And then I start talking about, okay, who does that work? Whenever you're looking at the university budgets, you'll see a mark, you'll see it says UNL, all right? Same way if I pick the power units and so on. We'll look at this, but I'm going to put in this information. I'm going to say what power unit, what tractor, what implement is used in this operation, and my materials, what my seed costs, and so on into that. So I've got it here in the labor. In this case, Dad helps us plant. I've got Dad in, I pay him so much, or maybe he's unpaid. I've got that marked in the labor section as such, okay? And then the power unit, in this case, I picked the big red tractor. Behind the scenes, I've got the big red tractor. It costs so much. It's this big of a tractor. This is how much fuel it uses per hour. That kind of information is behind the scenes so that we can develop our operation costs. Our implement, I pick the implement. I can name it. I can say that could be the John Deere planter. It could be whatever we want to call it. And then the materials is where we add in this case, I've added in some sort of fertilizer. So much applied, so many gallons, and so on. That goes into that as well. We have a manage input section. So like here behind the scenes, if I was live on the program, I could click this and show you my list of power units. And I've got all of those set up. I've got my list of materials. So once I have, let's say, a certain fertilizer entered in at a certain cost, I can just call on it. So again, once you do some initial work with this thing, it's easy. Then once I've got my labor list in, I can just call on it. And so also then the revenue side is pretty straightforward. We would like to eventually enhance this section and make it more of a marketing. So if I'm planning on raising so many bushels of corn or whatever it might be, and let's say I've priced ahead, I can say I've already got 20% priced at this rate, and so on. So we'd like to make it more of a marketing plan, but for now it's pretty static in that we're entering a price for that and moving on. This is just a quick look at our field operations report. I really like this report. And this will show us, it's very sensitive, I guess, today as I'm, let me look here. Sorry about that. Okay. So if you can take a look here, these are the different operations that I've entered into my enterprise. And so again, the labor, the fuel, the repairs, depreciation cost, and opportunity cost of owning that equipment is part of the cost figures here. And you can see in this case, it shows me that my burn down, if I'm doing it myself, and again, I'm showing university equipment, you'd have your own equipment in there, but this is what it costs me per acre to do the burn down, to spray the fertilizer, to plant, and all the way down the line. And so I can see what my operation costs are, per acre. So as I mentioned earlier about the custom rates, I have people asking me, well, what should I charge? So if I'm planting my neighbor's field, I've got my fields, but let's say I'm helping a neighbor plant, I can see that it costs me $25.77. Does that include enough for labor? I could build that up. I could add a profit. I could add a 15-20% profit to that figure. So I can use this information in the ag budget calculator to see what my costs are for operations. And so I refer people to this quite often when they're asking about their costs. Then the risk module. This is I live in Gage County, and this is just an example. We've got the risk module has the 8 reporting districts, crop reporting districts in Nebraska. And so we've got data behind the scenes in that. And this just shows that in Gage County, for dryland corn, at this point in time, we had a NAS average of 144.1 bushel. I had 145 bushel as my expected yield, so I was pretty close to that. And then this also tells us that there was a regional low in 2002 of 53 bushels, all right? So I then could click here and go in and take a look at, well, if I choose the 70%, 75%, 80% coverage on crop insurance, how, and let's say I have a 80 bushel yield, what does that scenario look like? What does my profitability look like versus what I expected it to be of 145? We've got break-even analysis built in as well. That does not include the crop insurance side of things. And then there's a whole farm report. So I can take a look at my projected revenue in total, my total costs, and then my different enterprises and the breakdown of those in a report as well. Okay, so right now, and you can always contact me if you have questions. I certainly appreciate it. I think we have a little bit of time. So I'm going to escape out of this and go to the ag budget calculator. All right, which I think it is in. Shannon, does that look okay? Can you see my ag budget calculator program?
Yeah, it looks good.
Thank you very much. Okay. All right. So now I'm actually in the program. Okay. I am, as I mentioned, I'm in this manage enterprise area. I'm going to click on that again. I have these different years set up, and I just actually have a 2024 UNL. I could change that name, and call it my 2024 year, whatever I want to do, just call it 2024. But right now I'm kind of working off the university budget year. Okay. So I wanted to show you that we've got drop downs across the top. Here's the university budget. So if I click on that, I have 2024, all of those budgets. They're numbered and generally alphabetized. Okay. So I had already saved this 23 corn budget into my account. All right. And I could go down and say, well, I really like this number 33 irrigated corn budget too. So I could look at the report here, or I could just go ahead and copy it. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I hit copy, and it says you've successfully copied that enterprise into your account. I'll say, okay. All right. So now this comes up, and I could say, okay, this is my corn. I'll just say this is on the Jones place. Okay. I could leave the number. I could leave all this other in there. Doesn't matter. Or I could just delete some of it. All right. And I'll just leave it in that year. I could choose another year, or I could add a new budget year if I wanted to, but I'm just going to leave it there. And in this case, yeah, I'm going to say that's about 137 acres on that pivot. This one came out at 275. I'm going to say, well, I'm usually more like 260. Okay, I can change that. It's irrigated. It's on my own ground. Let's say I'm going to say, no, I could probably rent that for 275. Real estate taxes, we're probably looking at more like, 105. All right, something like that. We do have, again, if you wanted to look, there's help messages. If I clicked on that, I'd have a help message here. Help message pops up. Okay. So I made a few changes there. I'm just going to click over here on the right side. As I said, we've got sort of action items on the right side. I'm going to save that. So I've got that in place. Okay. Now, when I click on Manage Enterprises, I've got this dryland corn budget that I had in there before. And now I've got this one, this irrigated budget in there. Okay. So I could go through and say, okay, I'm going to select a soybean budget. I'm going to select a wheat budget and add those in and then work with those. Okay. Or I could very simply just start a new crop enterprise, set new enterprise. I could say, again, my soybean budget. And I could say, okay, let's just stick it back in that year. I can select here. Here's soybeans. I have, let's say, 250 acres total of soybeans. I'm going to figure 60 bushel. All right. I could, they're all dry land in this case. Maybe I cash lease those. What do I rent that for? And again, that could be, let's say $180 an acre. So I could save that enterprise. All right. And then I go in and I could just start entering my field operations. So I'm not going to do that at this point in time. I'm going to go back here, but to show you, now I've got that soybean budget. set up, all right? And if I click on the operations here, field operations, I don't have anything in there yet, right? Okay. I'll go back. I'm just going to delete that for this for now. I don't want that in there now. I'm just going to show you how to work with these two budgets. In particular, I've already got this one pretty well done. I'm going to show you a report. All right. So as I mentioned, I could toggle between cash, my cash costs, or my economic. I've got a nice report here. I can print it, save it as a PDF. I can expand the details right here. So I could look at what went in on my seed side, my fertilizer, all my pesticides that I used, all the way down. And I'm looking here at operating costs, my land costs, and so on. So I see here that this budget is, and I had, what did I have in for yield here? I had 145 bushel yield in. It's a dry land. All right. I have $4.56 for economic costs. I had put in $5 as revenue. So I'm looking at 44 cents as a net return above total costs. Okay. I really like then these other reports, as I mentioned to you, that I can look in here and see what my operation costs are and my materials costs for each of those. And I can look at more detail here. I can print these off. I'll go back up, scroll back up. I'm going to hit print report. And I really like these two. So you'll see then also our university budgets. We have the total budget main report, and then we also show the field operation and material costs report. So when I hit print save, I can save it as a PDF, but it looks like this, and I can just hit print. And I can scroll down. So that first main report, here it is again. 44 cents is my net return. I can scroll down. I've got a couple more pages. And here's that page with my field operation costs, as we looked at before. And then here's a summary of all of my inputs that are in that budget. So it gives me some detail. And I could save it, put it in my files, or I could just click and print it off on one of my printers and then go from there. Okay. So I'm going to get back out of that. So we've got a lot of things happening over here. I could go in and edit the details. I could edit the operations. I'm going to click on that and show you. Here's that page of operations. And again, all the details were okay. If I had a red ad here, I probably wouldn't have been able to look at that report because it's something's missing and it would ask me about that. But I want to show you while we're in field operations real quick here too. I could copy, let's say I have multiple herbicide applications and they're pretty close. Using the same equipment, I could just copy it, which I might have done here. But in this case, I'm going to show you an edit on the planting. So I can name it however I want, say when I'm doing it. But here's that. I enter in the labor, who does it. Here's my power units. I have a drop down, so I could choose my power units. I'm not going to use a combine to plant, but I do have my large tractor in there. My implement, I'm using a university planter. I could put my own planter in this list. Once I put my own stuff in, I could delete all the university stuff. Because everything, when I pull down one of these budgets, everything comes with it. So if you can use it and then just clean things up and delete stuff that you don't want, put your own stuff in. And then materials, then again, I can look here and say, okay, here's what my seed costs, my fertilizer costs that went into that operation. And I really like this little thing right here, view this cost report. So I can look right away and say, oh yeah, this is costing me this much per acre. And here's what I've got into it for field operations and purchase materials. Just close that out. So I'm flipping through here pretty quick, but hopefully you get the idea that it's pretty easy to use. Manage inputs. If I wanted to look now and go in and add like new power units, I've got all my power units here open now. So I could look at the details behind that big red tractor. And let's just do that. It gives me a nice little summary. I could go in and edit it and say, no, that thing, let's say I want to trade it or whatever. I could delete it and then add a new one in. But the purchase price, this is how old it was when I bought it, the tack hours on it, This is information that is used in ag engineering formulas to figure out some salvage value, cost of repairs, and I can undo that, and it actually calculates from the program, or I can put my own figure in if I don't like what I'm seeing there. I put in the power unit, the PTO, horsepower, and then it does some calculations on fuel usage and so on. So I tell folks, sit down with your depreciation schedule, enter in your power units, enter in your implements. Now, I could go back here. Sometimes you might say, well, where am I now in this program? I'm going to get back to where I was. I use this back button a lot, okay? So I show people that and use that. And whenever you see lists like this, I can close up that list, and I could look at my list of implements by opening up that little triangle there, which is really cool. All my materials, so I've got all of my fertilizer, my pesticides, what are those costs per for a particular year that I'm working on, okay? So that's really how that works. So you can find that list here, or I could go over here and do this manage inputs here and have the same list come up, all right? So going back here, one thing I don't have in, let's just look here at this budget that I called up. I don't have, there should be an irrigation system in there. I'm just going to quickly go to the revenue and add in a revenue figure. Let's say $5 real quick. Let's go to edit operations again. Other expenses. So again, I pulled down the university budget. So we do have some figures in there for crop insurance, drying costs, overhead costs. We have some figures in there that I could change, because I want to make this my own budget. But for now, I wanted to show you. Okay, I entered in revenue. I'll go back here. All right. So I've got these two enterprises is all I've got in so far. I'm going to show you now the whole farm. Here's where that cash flow is. So I could click on that cash flow, which I'll do. Might take a little bit to think. But it has things summarized here. So I've put in some, I didn't say when I was marketing, so I could move those numbers and move them towards the end of the year. I can look at expand all details. So I could look here at my labor, my fuel. So like my seed is going to come in, I planted in April. So those costs are going to show up in April. But let's say I paid for those prior, I could make adjustments to that. So if I clicked on that, let's see here. I can also download this whole thing as a CSV file and put it into a spreadsheet if I wanted to, because that's one feature we thought we'd add here. So I am sorry, but I need to show you, and it's not coming to me at the moment, but we can move this material. I'll just go into the materials itself, and maybe that's where we need to do it. Okay, this is more like it. Okay, so if I click on here, I could move that over and say I paid for my seed in February. Okay, so I could go through and correct any of these things. Let's say I want to move this over. I'm not going to pay for that until later, and so then I would save that accordingly. Okay, and move all of those different things that I paid for, and then set up my cash flow. But I've done the work. I've said this is what I'm going to spend in fertilizer. This is what I'm spend in seed, and I can show that in this cash flow. It comes up to the cash flow, then I just make those adjustments. All right. So I also want to click on the whole farm once again. I could add in vehicles, overhead, reconciling costs, but I'm going to go back and just call up a whole farm. Okay, now here's those two enterprises. I mentioned to you, we've got these cool little reports. So with those two enterprises, it's 100 and some acres, 100, maybe whatever. I've got revenue total. So basically with those two enterprises is what my net return projections are looking like. Okay. Or I could just call up a full report. And again, toggle between cash and economic and have those reports. So, we have any questions that have come in? Does anybody have anything they want to know at this point in time? I think, again, we're getting really positive feedback from people that have learned to use this program. I hope that you can take time and you can spend, as we're looking at 2024, utilize what we've got into the reports, into our university budgets, or you can just, again, do your own. I could click here and duplicate any enterprise that I've already got set up. So it's actually a fairly simple program at this point in time, and we're trying to make it very, very user-friendly. So, Shannon, does anything come to mind? Any questions on anything?
Well, you talked a little bit about labor prices and stuff, but can you show kind of where to pull some of that from? Because I know that you guys do that like every year or two. So
Okay, so our labor, well, we do ask on our custom rates
yeah.
survey what folks are paying for labor. Otherwise, we don't really have what we would call an official labor survey. I think the other thing is that there's just a lot of things in this that if I was to look at those, go back to let's go here, go back to my field operation report. I'll just do a view report here. And here's more reports, field operation report. But here we can see what it's costing us, but some folks might want to look at, well, what does this cost me versus what if I had someone do a custom work? Okay, so you can do some comparisons with that. If you wanted to look at the labor, setting up the different folks under labor, so that I can actually put my own value, my own time, whether it's paid or unpaid. So I might be officially getting paid so much an hour for all the work that I do on the farm. But let's look at how I set up like Dad. Dad helps us. I have him marked as paid. He's hourly, gets $20 an hour, or let's say he gets a salary. Okay. So I could make those changes and set him up, however. I can add a new labor. Let's see here. If I go back, return to previous page. I go to labor. I can add somebody new. So I could put Shannon in here, and Shannon, your family, and you're unpaid. Let's say I've got a kids working for me.
I grew up that way, so that's fine.
You grew up on the farm that way. Yeah, right. So let's say we value $15 an hour. And let's say you put in 100 hours there's no cash benefits. But anyway, that's how we set that up. And then when you are doing some kind of field operation, like you're in the list here, okay?
Yeah.
So when you're doing a field operation or something, I can say, Shannon does that work. Let's say I do half of it and Shannon does half of it. We could put that in. But yeah, as far as actual labor rates, I mean, you can basically put in whatever value you want. Or me as an operator, if I'm a sole owner operator, I could basically put 0 in and just say, I'm just going to look at what my net profits are. And, that's what I have to live on. And I'm not putting extra labor value in. So that can be all over the board. We are using $25 in our university labor rate. Again, we try to keep those things kind of consistent from year to year. We haven't made any big jumps in that in the last several years, but I mean, that could happen. Something we should be watching, as a group to see whether we should be changing that. So again, feedback, information, ideas from people, we always appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So just watch our CAP website. We do have sessions. I'll be scheduling sessions online, and then I'd be glad to come to your area if you want to host and have folks in to learn more about the program, learn more about budgeting. You can always let us know. So, okay.
Absolutely. I don't see a whole lot of questions about it, but I do know Glennis does have some help sessions scheduled through fall and winter, I believe, so.
Yeah, and I'll be scheduling more as well.
Yes, and like she said, if you want an in-person one, she's happy to do that. Just let her know if you have a group of people that y'all want to get together and learn about.
I actually have a student intern too, who has learned the program.
Mm.
And one of the purposes of having him is that he could actually help some individuals too. And it works really well to show it and to learn together and look at Zoom, so we don't have the travel costs. But if anybody would like some individual attention and help, I do have a student intern that we could utilize him to help as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, and I know you have like base budgets and all that stuff that people can pull from, so that you're not starting from ground zero. Because at least personally, it could be a little overwhelming to start with nothing. So sometimes it's easier for me to just look at one and modify and be like, oh yeah, okay, this is what I need to change. So, yeah.
For sure.
Yes. So, all right. So thank you everyone for joining us today. A recording of this webinar will be posted at cap.unl.edu, where you can also register for other upcoming webinars. And we would really appreciate your feedback on the brief evaluation that should pop up as you close out of Zoom. That helps tell us how today went and inform us of future webinars. Thank you again for joining us. Have a great day.